Okay, we're going to look at Dracula and its origins and the origin of vampires. You know, most people are familiar with Bela Lugosi and his portrayal of Bram Stoker's Dracula, which are famous stories that they ended up making at dinner parties about Frankenstein and all these other monsters that came from folklore. Now, this folklore goes back a lot farther than this. To kill a vampire, you have to um, stab him through the heart with a wooden stake. You have to use garlic to repel him away, and they, like Nosferatu right here, surely can't be exposed to sunlight or it'll burn them away, that they're a nocturnal creature. And so that's the small time of our going from 1897 here to 2017 with the Irishman Bram Stoker's idea. But it goes back farther than that with Nosferatu shown here in the picture and his concept, and before that all the way back to 3000 BC and farther than that. It's just tabulated there. And it was found out that it is in Mesopotamia, and again the Sumerian people, of a creature known as Lamashtu, which again goes back farther than 3000 BC. Now, Lamashtu is a strange creature and extremely odd here. It's got a undead, half-skinned face of a lion, and it's kind of the reverse of a griffin, if you will. It's a bird-like body, but it has fangs on it, right? It's an undead creature here that's dead. It has no eyes in its socket. Its skeleton is showing on its face. It seems to have like a donkey row of teeth, and then it has vampire fangs, or what almost look like snake fangs, and his arms are also those of a lion, and this powerfulness where he has these claws onto him. And of course, this also gives wind, if you think about it, to the idea of a bat. Whereas bats have fangs, they can bring about illness and disease. Vampire bats try to suck your blood. They can fly, like this creature here, and so on. Here he is getting pushed away by the god Ninurta, and here Ninurta is the taking over the lightning god's role, and this is the lightning storm. And of course, I've showed you in a few videos where this lightning effigy is the same through Zeus, through Baal, through everyone through here, showing a commonality. And here's a commonality of this ancient folklore about vampires and creatures that eat blood. I mean, it has like these horns or ears on his head that look like bat ears. I don't know if that quite shows up in the top up there, but and so he's a flying creature that sucks blood and has claws on him. Now they've made this thing into a huge creature, of course, but later we seem to find this blend into the Judeo-Christian belief of Lilith, and a lot of people know about some of the stories they have along that with, like Lilith. Now, originally, Lamashtu here was the creature that was blamed on stillbirths, and if a woman was to bleed to death during childbirth and things, that this was blamed on her. And I don't know if you remember, recently I made a original video on demons and Pazuzu, which was from The Exorcist and so on. Now, Pazuzu was actually a warding demon to keep away something like Lamashtu. They indeed believed that you had to have something that was much more, aggressive to be able to handle that type of thing. And so they scared a demon away with another demon, but a demon they had befriended and done things. And so you have this lesser of two evils, if you will, trying to help you out. It's a strange concept, but all these strange concepts come out of old shamanistic beliefs and stuff that go way back before this, and ideas they made up on why women die in childbirth and things like that, why sometimes bleeding cannot be stopped, things along this line. So there's Lilith, and of course Lilith is also attached to an idea of an owl, and it shows you that that really goes back to Inanna Ishtar and her whole concept too, and that they say that she can become evil, and they show you even here with her red hair and so on that goes with Inanna, and that concept of the woman gone sour because she had been infertile and therefore caused a big problem. And this effigy concept of this gets bred throughout, all the way up through, and even into Europe and things like that, where in Europe they have something similar to this, I guess you'd say, and this is known as doggers. And Doggers is an undead man or an undead creature that is not happy or satisfied with life and wants his treasure back and things and guards his treasure. And this is the idea of, like in Dungeons and Dragons, of liches and things like that, are these undead creatures that's very much like a mummy or a zombie. Only in this concept, they don't want to eat your brains. They want to torment you because you caused them the problem of their death and you caused their thing. They live in these underground crypts and only come out at night. And so this blends this idea too. And the only thing you can do is you have to drag them back into their crypt and put this on their chest, and it's got warding glyphs on the top of it. So again, you have that. So ancient Middle East has, sucked by blood, demonic goddess, Sumeria type creature, and it ate babies, right? Jewish had the belief of the sucked blood. It was a temptress instead of a demonic goddess, but then it was still demonic creature, and it ate babies. The Norse belief there was that it sucked blood, it was haunted, it was, of course, undead, like the original Lamashtu was, didn't have that written on there, and immune to conventional weapons. And so you start to get this idea, and of course in Dungeons and Dragons and things, it's generally the idea of concept that you have to use +1 weapons, you have to use silver weapons, you have to use something magical. Normal things don't work for them, it'll just literally cause no damage at all. And so it has to be something that's imbued with magic, and this entails the whole shamanistic idea. Late medieval Eastern Europe even had this concept of, people being sucked by blood, and people that have ailments and things they would blame on this happening, usually a demonic zombie or undead. It was known to be haunted, and it was always after bad creatures or bad spirits. Perhaps you were not buried correctly, and in fact that goes all the way back to the Sumerians, where they said most of these creatures were for being undead, or were walking the earth as undead because they hadn't been buried correctly. In fact, that goes back to the ancient tale of Gilgamesh, when Enkidu is woken from near death, and he recounts what it's like in the afterlife, and he tells you that people that weren't buried correctly are in constant sorrow and things, but kids that die in childbirth are actually fed well here, and they're eating at this nice gold and silver table with lots of foods and bread and even butter, they describe, and stuff. So it can be bad for somebody not buried correctly, and of course not buried correctly can cause these problems. And indeed, through the medieval ages, they always blamed it on somebody not getting buried correctly. Quite often a way to fix this was to rebury somebody. You basically took and reburied him again. Here's a Serbian depiction of one, and it's an odd thing too. It shows you that on the back of the creature it had a face. It's kind of a two-face thing, or this is the idea that it knows your thoughts, it can see behind its eyes, it's everything else. Why a person would all of a sudden turn into a hairy clawed demon thing. But and the person just sits here like casual looking, like they can't do anything about it. It's kind of caught in the gaze, if you will. And this is a depiction that they had, an old etching of a vampire attack. They had beliefs in all this, werewolves and things like that too. Perhaps I'll do one here on werewolves and lycanthropy also. It's quite interesting too. But medieval art is weird sometimes, and so you have to deal with things like that. I mean, just look at his shoes and how pointy they are and elf-like they are, and it just kind of makes you wonder what the deal is. But this whole area that we're talking about, that everybody always keys on Transylvania, but it isn't really Transylvania where it started. In fact, Wallachia is where Vlad the Impaler was from. But in certain areas they had beheading, or they'd had wooden stakes that you used. The gypsies and wandering nomads had iron stakes. People up in this area talked about garlic, not so much in the others, but they shared this effect with each other and let each other know how to ward off these creatures that everybody believed in. And so you can see Bram Stoker here and his incredible Irish tale, and he took these concepts of the garlic and the wooden stake and the idea of Vlad the Impaler and put them together into an idea of somebody now that actually had a will and a concept. They wanted to take your women. He had power over you, and very much like here, he could control your mind. He could do all these different things to him. That's what came about in that story. But that all peels back to something some 5,000 years ago, and actually that's just when it was first written down. It goes back to primordial times where these ancient beliefs and these people, like in the Bible, there's the Amalekites, and they were supposed to have drank blood, and there was all these cults that used to drink blood, and then they were evil people, and people got into fights with them, killed them off, did all these things. And so then they start talking crap about those people, and it just gets way out of hand. And some of the stories go off of an ancient queen who supposedly used to take virgin girls' blood and bathe in it, and all these weird, outlandish stories that all added up together to give power to this creature that's wearing a tuxedo, has a cape, can turn into a mist or a bat, and don't meet his gaze or he'll have control over you. Well, that's the origin of Dracula, though. Y'all have a happy Halloween. Keep some garlic around handy. I like Italian food.